up, Danny? Can you hear me?
Hi, yes, I can hear you.
How you doing today?
I'm doing fine. How about yourself?
Doing well. Excited to have this convo with you.
Yeah, me too. All right. Why don't we get started?
Sounds great.
Everyone for joining After School Matters, My Shot, My Future Instagram Live series. Myself and Joe will be hosting a Q&A. Joe is After School Matters Post-Secondary Program Manager. And we're just going to be talking about some tips and tricks on how to prepare for college and beyond. So, yeah, you can introduce yourself, Joe.
Yeah, hey everybody, excited to be here. Excited to chat with all of you about college and some tips and tricks and some of the best practices that I've learned just kind of through my experience and kind of working in college admissions and all of those things. And excited to be here and share some of that with you.
Yep. Hi, Carson. Hi, everyone. So, yeah, I'm Danny. I'm currently 15. I'll be 16 this September. And I am in Les Enfants dance program for After School Matters. So I'm a dancer.
Very cool. Are you enjoying it?
Yeah, I'm enjoying it a lot. This is, I just applied for the summer. So this is my first time doing After School Matters. It's been a blast ever since. So I guess we'll start off with some questions I have for you.
Sounds good.
Is what is one piece of advice you wish you had before you started college?
Ooh, just coming right out of the gate with them. I love it. I love it. I love it. A piece of advice that I wish I had before I started college. Gosh, I wish somebody would have told me to actually learn the material, like to actually comprehend it. I was very used to in high school kind of grabbing the Spark Notes or the Clip Notes, maybe reading part of the readings and kind of doing my best on the test. And really it was just a lot of memorization, right? I'd memorize what I needed to know for the test, take the test, and probably 2 weeks later I'd forget it. And unfortunately, I brought that same approach with me to college, right? And so people ask me, like, what'd you learn in college? And I'm like, gosh, I probably learned a lot of stuff. I just wish I could remember it, you know? And so I think one of the biggest pieces of advice that I wish that I had was somebody just saying, take the time, learn it, absorb it, ask the questions. This is the time when you can take just a class in everything. I took a class on how to play racquetball. That was a real class that I took. Racquetball 101 as a freshman, right? That was probably the class where I learned the most. So truly, I would say a piece of advice I wish I had was to learn the material, to take it in, to comprehend it, to ask those questions, work with group mates and with partners. It'll be tempting. It'll be easy to do what we were doing through high school, to just try to memorize it, take the test, and keep moving forward. And so I think if I could share a piece of advice to all of you, it would really be to take the time to learn the material, especially because once you started to get into some of those major classes, this is going to be the stuff that you want to learn, right? So if you're going into forensics, you're going to take some of those classes. So you really want to learn it, want to absorb it. Also, if you go into these fields, then it's going to be important that you actually know the stuff, right? And so really take that time in college to absorb it, to learn it, ask those questions, and truly become an expert in it. Walk out of college feeling like, you know what, I'm the best at this, and feel confident that you are.
Yeah, well, that's great, because that's what I'm trying to do now, is basically learn the material before I go off to college.
Yeah.
Forget a lot and, get distracted easily. So
yes, and I promise you, college is going to have even more distractions, right? And so it'll be even more important that you're creating those schedules, creating those calendars. You know, what I started doing when I was a freshman was just have a bunch of lists, and then I would have a list of lists of lists, right? That wouldn't really mean anything. So just like using that calendar, using that planner. A lot of schools might give you a planner your freshman year, and really using that and writing down assignments and actually like sticking to your own calendar, right? It's one thing to write down like, I'm going to work on this for 30 minutes on Wednesday. And then all of a sudden it's Wednesday and you're like, do I really want to? Like, yes, stick to the plans that you make for yourself. I promise it'll make it a lot easier.
Great. Okay, my next question is, if you could go back and do it over again, what would you change about your college experience?
Ooh, ooh. What would I change? Gosh, I hope none of them are watching, but I think I would pick different friends, right? That kind of sounds weird, but one of the things that is really important in college is to surround yourself with other motivated individuals, people who have plans, people who want to push you forward. You'd rather have that friend that says, "Hey, you got that test tomorrow? Yo, I'll stay in and study with you tonight. Let's not worry about it," instead of that friend that's like, "Yo, that test tomorrow, don't worry about it. We got this party to go to tonight," right? And there's going to be both groups of individuals that you're going to meet in college. And so I think choosing the crew that you hang out with, choosing your friends, gosh, I think that that's so important. You want individuals who are going to continue to push you forward, who are going to challenge you, who have high expectations for you. So if you say like, "Hey guys, I'm not going to class," there's going to be a group of friends who might be like, "Cool, us neither. You want to play some Xbox?" There's going to be another group of friends who are saying like, "No, you should go to class. Like, let's go to class. Let's go together. Let's walk together." And you really want those friends who are there that are pushing you. So I ended up finding those, but it took me a while to find those. College is this brand new experience, and you're excited, and there's a lot of distractions. And so I think taking that time to find who really has your back and who really wants the best for you, or who really just wants someone to go to a party with, right? And so I think if I were to do it over again, like I said, I really hope none of them are watching, but I would choose different friends, choose a better crew to hang out with, a crew that would push me more, would motivate me more. I ended up going to college for 5 years because I didn't do so well my first year, so I had to go an extra year. And sometimes I think back that maybe if I had better influences, and not to say that it's like all their fault, right? But if I had other individuals pushing me forward, then maybe I would have finished on time and would have finished in those 4 years. So if I were to do it over again, I would find a group of friends, people that are thinking like me, that really wants the best from their college experience, and make sure that that's the group that I'm hanging with, who's pushing me forward.
Great. Because during this time and this generation of kids, we call everyone our friends nowadays.
Yes.
So we do have to choose and be smart what we do.
Yeah, and it's not to say, right, that you have to have just like one certain group, and just know which friends to go to for what, too, I think is really important. So I knew, eventually I learned, like, okay, if I want to talk about school or about my career after school or just about goals, then that had to be with this group of people, right? But that's not to say that I stopped hanging out with this other group who wanted to go bowling or out to a party or something. It's just being able to like balance that time and kind of know who your friends are and for what purposes, and really who's going to keep pushing you forward. Yeah, absolutely.
Great. All right, my next question is, what tips and tricks do you have on like saving and budgeting during college?
Ooh, another good one. Dang, Danny, these are awesome. So I think for budgeting and saving for college, I think my first point it would be that you do not have to take, and if we talk about financial aid, I'll bring this up again, but you do not have to take all of the aid that is offered to you, right? So you're going to get this financial aid package, and it's going to say, here's X amount of dollars or X thousands of dollars, right? And you could say, here's $20,000 for your education, but you know that your education is only going to cost you maybe 15. You don't need to take all 20, right? You can say, actually, thank you for the offer. I'm going to only take the 15 that I need, because if you take more, then you have to pay back more. That interest is going to be higher, right? And it's going to take longer to pay back. So a big piece of advice is just to really go in with a plan. Think about, okay, how much money do I need? I need this much for school. I'm going to want this much for my books and things like that. Maybe I want this much for food. And then after that, I don't necessarily need any more. And if I do, maybe I can get a job on campus. And so be aware of the amount of money that you're accepting from the FAFSA, from your university, from any of these sources that are providing you money. Just kind of be conscious of how much money you're taking on in loans. And if you don't need all of it, it's okay to say no. It's okay to turn down aid. Another piece of advice I would offer is to just become best friends with the financial aid office. Like, go every single day. You want to be the type of person that they see you coming and they're like, Danny's coming. Hold on, let's get his file ready. Because they already know your name. They know the questions you're going to ask. You want to be that person to where there's a face to the name too, right? A lot of these universities are big universities. And if you're just sending an email saying like, hey, I have some questions about my financial aid, but they've never seen you or they've never met you, not that they're purposely ignoring it, but just that it's easier to kind of relate to somebody that you've seen, that you've met before, who's saying hi every day, who's friendly and waving to you and asking these questions. And so I think that would be another piece, is just to like go to financial aid all the time, become their best friends, introduce yourself. If you can get a job on campus, get a job in the financial aid office, right? Then you're there all the time anyways, you're making friends with them. They know who you are as a worker. They know your work ethic. And so then if next semester you're like, hey, I need a little bit more in aid, you're not a stranger. So those would just be my little ones, kind of some tips and tricks that I learned. And I don't know if this is at every university, but a lot of universities have like psychology departments that are always doing experiments. So you could make, $10 for an experiment. I remember I sat down and had to show how fast I could type, and they gave me like $10 just for typing for 20 minutes or something like that. And so if you're just looking for some extra walking around money, some extra money for lunches or something like that, maybe check out what certain departments on campus are offering. And then I would also just talk about work study. So work study is part of your financial aid package. And you could do work study jobs on campus, off campus. If you're eligible for work study, on campus, resources on campus departments want to hire you. They're more likely to hire you because they actually get to pay less money out of pocket, right? So let's say, Danny, I would pay you $10 an hour normally to work in my financial aid office or whatever. But I see that you have work study. So actually $8 an hour is going to be covered by your FAFSA. And so I only have to pay you $2 an hour because you're going to get that other $8 from somebody else. So I'm much more likely to hire somebody who has work study because it's going to help my budget. And so maybe I could hire 10 work study students instead of only 3 students full time if I'd have to pay them all $10 an hour. So take advantage of work study if you get offered work study. Try to find some of those jobs on campus. I would also recommend working on campus. I think if you could find an on-campus job, they're much more flexible when you have homework or a test or you've got a huge paper. Because they're a part of that university system, they might be more flexible if you have to say like, hey, is it okay if I come in an hour late because I'm studying for this test? Or is it okay if I take tomorrow off because I have this really big paper to do? And because they're a part of the system, they might be a little bit more lenient than say you're working at an off-campus job at a for-profit, a Best Buy or whatever's in town, Target or something like that. They may not be as flexible because they're not a part of that like system. And so if you could find jobs on campus, definitely pursue those before looking at some of those off-campus jobs.
Great. So I heard that like when you're about to go to college, it's good to stay on campus your first year or something like that. Is that correct?
Yes. Highly recommend it. You are going to meet some just amazing individuals from all over the country, from all over the world. The coolest thing about being a freshman is that everybody's scared, right? Nobody knows what they're doing. And so if you have a chance as a freshman to connect with other freshmen, if you have a chance to make some of those friends your freshman year, some of those friends are going to be those friends that you have throughout all of college because you're going through some of that learning together. You're figuring it out together. And so would highly recommend living on campus, living in the dorms if you can, joining everything. I think that was one thing that I would share too. If I were to do it all over again, I would probably get involved more. I wasn't really in any clubs. I played like intramural sports and things like that, but I didn't join. I didn't really join any clubs. Wasn't in a fraternity. Wasn't a part of any academic clubs or anything like that. And so that's something that I regret. That's something that I wish that I would have done more. I think I would have learned more just about myself, what I like, what I don't like. I'd learn more just about what clubs on campus are doing. And then it would also give me an opportunity to connect with more people, to make some more friends who might have those similar interests. So if I'm joining a club about history because I want to be a history teacher, then hopefully everybody in that club also likes history, right? And so we have some of these commonalities. We could bounce ideas off of each other. We could talk about the assignments that we have. And so I would say get involved as much as you can, but also don't overwhelm yourself. Right, you're a freshman. There's going to be a whole bunch of new stuff, and so it's really important to find that balance freshman year. And I think an easy way to do that is to live on campus. You're going to have resident assistants who are going to help you stay on track. There's awesome resources on campus and individuals who want to continue to support you and push you forward. And so I think living on campus puts you in the environment to take advantage of some of those resources.
Yeah, I can relate to probably being a freshman on college because I was just recently a freshman in high school.
Yeah.
Now I'm a sophomore, and I was involved a lot. I got into a lot of things, so I think I'll be fine.
Good. Yeah, do it. Just do it.
So my next question is, what is the, am I saying it right, FAFSA?
Yep.
What is the FAFSA, and when should I complete it?
Yeah, great question. So the FAFSA is basically the loan program, the student loan program that is controlled by our government. It opens up in October. So that October of your senior year is when you want to get in there and do it. The way the FAFSA works is that there's a pool of money, and the earlier that you get your application in, the higher the chances that you're able to get more of that money. So if you apply in October, when there's still, let's say, and these are all just made up numbers, let's say in October there's $100 million, but so you have access to sort of all of that. But if you're not applying until maybe that next semester in April, that 100 million might have all of a sudden become 100,000, and now there's not as much money available. So it opens in October. You want to complete it in October of that senior year. You want to complete it. It opens October 1st. Try to complete it sometime in October as early as possible. It's super important to get it in early. And I would say yes, even if you're sitting there, I don't know if I'm going to need loans, or loans are pretty expensive, or you can always, again, like I said, turn them down later if you realize, hey, I don't need all of this, or this isn't actually what I'm looking for. The other reason to apply to financial aid is because that's where they're going to give you that work study. So that work study that I was talking about earlier is going to come from completing the FAFSA. And so if you say, maybe I don't want these loans, but I do want this $5,000 in work study so I can get a job on campus, then that would all be through that FAFSA process. So I would recommend that everybody fill it out, because again, just because you complete it doesn't mean that you have to take those loans. It doesn't mean that those loans are guaranteed or anything like that. And so it doesn't hurt to complete it, especially because you might get some of that work study offer, which would make you more eligible on campus to get different jobs.
Okay, great. So it's basically like a help system, to help students with money.
Yeah, so it'll help you while you're in college. As soon as you graduate, the government's then going to expect that you start paying back that loan. So it is a loan that you're taking out essentially from the government. While you're in school, for the most part, they're going to say, hey, as long as you're a student, we don't expect you to pay this back. It's usually about 6 months after you graduate. They're going to say, hey, you graduated 6 months ago. We assume you have a job now. About that money we let you borrow, right? And so then they're going to start expecting that back. So it's not necessarily free money. There is some free money involved. The Pell Grant, the MAP grants in Illinois is a big one. But so it's to help you pay for college up front. But then you're still going to have to pay back a lot of that, right? And so that's where you hear all these people talking about loan debt and all these loans that they take out. Some of that is through that FAFSA process, which again, it's important to take a look at that amount and make sure you're only taking what you need. You can say, hey, thank you for offering me $70,000. That is excessive. My school is only going to cost me $30,000. I do not need that other $40,000. I do not want that other $40,000, because that's just going to be more that you have to pay back later. And so just making sure that you could always turn some down is really important with the process. So free money is the best, right? Grants are great. Scholarships are great. That's free money. Loans, like the FAFSA, is sort of like that next level. You could find private loans out there, but just be aware of like predatory loans with crazy interest rates or that are based on credit history. And if there's bad credit history, then that rate's going to be crazy. And so I would start with trying to get your scholarships, your grants, and then filling out the FAFSA to see what they can do there. And then maybe pursuing some of those other opportunities later on as sort of like a last resort to make ends meet if you're still a little bit short for tuition.
Okay, great. So my next question is, should I switch my major, and am I locked in a specific industry forever based on my degree?
Love that question. So, gosh, I'll tell you my story. I went to college. I remember sitting there meeting with my advisor as a freshman. We're sitting in her office, and she's asking me, so like, what do you want to major in? You know, you're a freshman, and everything's an option, right? Like literally, you have like a course catalog this big of just like everything's an option at that point. And I'll never forget, I was sitting there, and I was just like, well, I really want to major in psychology because I want to have to eventually. I'm going to go and work for the CIA and have to think how these big criminals think in order to catch them. And I'll never forget my advisor sitting there and saying, oh, sweetie, that is not what your psychology degree is going to, like, that is not what this is, right? So this whole time I thought, I've seen some movies about, serial killer profiles and stuff like that. And they always had backgrounds in psychology. And I'd heard like psychology is a good profession. And so in my mind, I created this narrative that like, cool, I'm going to get my bachelor's degree in psychology. And then I'm going to immediately go and join the CIA and be this international spy because I have a background in psychology. And like I said, I'll never forget, she was just sitting there smiling and she's just like, oh, sweetie. And I could just see it on her face. She's like, you poor soul. But really, because I didn't know, right? It's one of those things. College is so weird where a lot of the information that we're getting about college is what we see in pictures or what we see in videos or what we see on YouTube, right? And there isn't a lot of this information necessarily available, like this major equals this career. So ended up not being a switch from a psychology major. So I was a psychology major my freshman year, switched from that to a history major. So met with that same advisor and I was like, hey, I think I'm going to switch to history. And she's like, okay, history. What are you going to do with that?
Right.
Touche, advisor. Touche. Very good question. And so I switched again, actually. So I switched my major 3 times. And so I think I'll kind of chat a little bit after this about sort of the time when you should switch your majors. And so I was fortunate enough to be able to switch my first major as a freshman. I switched then again as a sophomore. So by the second half of my sophomore year, that second semester of my sophomore year, when I finally decided, hey, I'm going to be a teacher. So I saw somebody's comments like, he must be a teacher. You're so true. Like, I really am. Like, I really am a teacher. So like, you know me too well. So I went into education, and what was cool was because I already had a bunch of psychology credits and because I already had a bunch of history credits, it was easier then to become endorsed to teach psychology and teach history. So it wasn't as if that first year and a half went to waste. I was still able to apply those courses to my new major. So yes, you can switch majors. It also depends on the length of time that you want to be in school. So if you switch your major as a freshman, probably not a big deal. All freshmen are going to take a lot of the same classes. Everybody's going to have to take an English class. Everybody's going to have to take some kind of math class. You have to take some sort of humanities, whether it's sociology, psychology, history, something like that. You may have to take one of the hard sciences like bio or chemistry. So that freshman year, no matter the major, classes are going to be pretty similar. And so if you come in and say, hey, I'm a psych major, and then eventually you say, no, I want to be an accounting major. As a freshman, you have some more of that wiggle room. Even partway through your sophomore year, you have some of that wiggle room. after that, you can absolutely still change majors. You can always change your major, but a lot of degree programs require a certain number of credits in that specific field. And so if I'm already a junior, let's say I have 90 credit hours and I need 180 to graduate. So cool, I'm starting my junior year. I only need 90 more credits. But if I'm joining the accounting program might say, hey, actually, we need you to have 120 credits in accounting. And so that might extend that time a little bit more if I'm switching majors that drastically or that late. If you do decide that you want to switch your major that late, the recommendation is usually that you try to switch within the same field, sort of. So, if you want to go from an accounting major to a finance major, perhaps that won't add too much extra time in college because you've probably taken a lot of the same math classes you would need, the econ classes that you would need. But if you switch, say, from a finance major to a nursing major, then there's going to be like a whole new program. They're going to say, okay, cool. Well, for finance, you didn't need to take physiology and anatomy. You now do for nursing. And so it depends on what you're switching to, like from and to, I think is important. And then I think that time. So I think you could probably switch as much as you want and drastically between that freshman year and kind of halfway through that sophomore year. After that, it becomes a little bit more difficult to switch because, you can still switch, but then it might extend some time to your school year. The cool thing, the piece that I do want to share is that you're not you're not locked into that career forever, right? So, for example, my degree is in education. I'm working at After School Matters as a program manager, and I'm no longer teaching in the classroom, right? But my degree sort of got me into the field of education. It got me into the door. It allowed me to meet some awesome people. Gosh, I have a colleague at After School Matters. His degree is in biology. He's a biologist, and he's working in our team payroll at After School Matters. And I just think that is like the coolest thing in the world, that you have so much knowledge about biology, but you also know about spreadsheets and pay and how all of that works. And so it's not always, don't think that you're stuck in a specific career just because that's what your degree is in, or that's what your major says. If your bachelor's degree says, I have a bachelor's degree in accounting, but now I do anything, right? Like you could still do so many things. And yeah, really good. Oh, good question. Dang.
Yeah, because I have I love to dance, but when I was little, I also did baseball for 6 years. I've done a lot of stuff. I like to cook. I like to do a lot of things. So I'm like, how am I going to do it all at once?
Yes.
So I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, and it's what's cool is that some of those could overlap, right? So you could major in one thing and minor in another thing, or a lot of times you could get a degree in the arts, right? And that might include, I have a degree in the arts, or I have a degree in arts degree, for example, and that might include your specialty might be dance, and your subspecialty might be culinary arts, or something like that, right? And so there are sometimes these like broad degrees where you can get super specific. So my degree is in education, but then my specificities come in when it says I could teach 9 through 12 graders U.S. history, right? And so then it gets super, super specific, even though my general degree says a degree in education. And so you could find ways to make your interests sort of fit into your degrees, or to pursue a few different interests within one degree.
Okay, great. All right. My next question is, what does a college degree say to future employers?
Dang, Danny, these are awesome. So I think the big thing that your college degree tells future employers is that you can learn at a high level. I mean, no employer is really going to expect you to come in and say, hey, welcome to Microsoft. Get started. And you're like, but wait, what's the job, right? Like, there's always going to be some sort of a training period in any job that you go to. They're going to make sure that you learn about their product, about their software, about all of these their processes, right? And your college degree lets that employer know, hey, I have this ability to learn. I could learn the things that you want to teach me. I could learn about your company. I can do what you're asking me to do. It also shows that you could meet the deadlines because you had to do certain deadlines as you were moving forward, right? And so it shows that you can do group work and get along with different people, right? Because that's what you're going to be doing in college. So your college degree really tells that employer, even if your degree isn't in the thing that you're going into, it really shows, hey, I have the ability to learn at a high level. I have the ability to learn what it is that you need me to learn about this company. I have an ability to get along with others and work in groups. And I have this ability to meet those deadlines, to stay on track, and make sure that I'm progressing in a certain way that's really going to benefit this company, because those are all things that you had to do in college. And so again, even if your degree doesn't directly relate to the job, just having that degree shows employers, hey, I'm the real deal. I can do this.
Great. Let me see. My next question is, what should I write about in my college application essay?
So I think there's a few things. I think it depends on the essay. So, for example, the common application is going to give you a few different prompts. Different colleges might have different prompts, but honestly, the prompt is usually something along the lines of, tell us how you've impacted your community. Tell us what you've learned about yourself and the world around you. They want to see some sort of transformation. Tell us about a time in your life where you learned a lesson, where you grew, where you evolved as a person. And so they really want to see those stories, to hear those stories. So I think that the big thing about those is they want to hear about you, right? So we're admissions counselors. We're sitting here, Danny, you and I are on the admissions team. We've got 100 different students that we're trying to review to get in. Of those 100, maybe we have 50 of them who all have 3.0 GPAs. They all have, a 1200 SAT score. So how do we choose now when just looking at the transcripts, they all seem to be very, very similar? But now it comes to that essay, right? So that essay is kind of like that icing on the cake. That's your final shot to say, hey, this is what sets me apart from those other students that might have a similar GPA or might have similar test scores. And so they want to hear about you. Some common mistakes that I've seen just working in admissions is where, for example, you're going to tell me maybe a time where your grandma did something and you learned from it. And maybe the first, you have 600 words to write this essay, and the whole first 400 words are all about your grandma and how she's amazing and how she's this awesome cook and she does all these awesome things. And then your last 200 words tell the story about one time when you learned something from your grandma and how you grew. And while that's awesome, grandma, it makes me wish that your grandma was applying, right? Like, you told me this whole essay about this wonderful person that your grandma is, but where I've seen some of those mistakes are usually when students spend a lot of time writing about someone who was influential instead of telling that story about that influential moment. So I don't need all that background on your grandma. What I need to know about is the one time that the story that you're going to tell me, how you evolved as a person. And if it has to do with your grandma, that's awesome, but tell me about you, right? I want to read this essay and I want to say, whoa, I like this student. We need to get this student at our school. And so make sure you're spending that time telling your story, being real, being authentic about yourself. I would say another important piece is to make sure that you're really telling about that pivotal moment and how you changed, how you evolved. You can and when you tell me about it, I want to feel like I'm there, right? So when you're telling me about it, one of the things that I've heard is show me, don't tell me, right? And so, what was the day like? Was it hot out? What were you wearing? Were you sweating? Were you nervous? Tell me how fast your heart was racing. Give me those details so that when I'm reading this essay, I'm reading it and I'm right there with you. I'm going through whatever this moment is, whatever this transformative time in your life is. I'm there with you, and so don't skimp on those details. Make sure that you're really painting that picture for me, not just saying, well, this one time, I was in Chicago and this thing happened to me, and you tell the story about the thing. But I remember it was the middle of summer, one of the hottest days in August, and I remember just sweat dripping down my face as I was so nervous walking to the park because it was the first time I was going to try to play a pickup basketball game. I know that my skills aren't there, but I was going to do it this time. And then what happened, right? Maybe you played the game and you did awesome, and it's your whole story is about your confidence building or something like that. But tell me the story as if it was yesterday, as if I was there. So when I'm reading it, I'm starting to sweat because you're telling me about how hot it was, right? And so that it's real, that it's authentic, it's real. You're getting those details out there. I would much rather read a very detailed, descriptive story that has all of those details in it versus someone just saying like, yeah, this one time in Chicago, I went to the park. I was going to play some basketball. I'm not really good at basketball. I decided I want to play today. I jumped in the game. I ended up scoring 20 points. We were only playing to 21. No big deal. So it really helped me improve my confidence. Like that story versus, it was a hot day. I was sweating. My heart was racing a billion, a billion miles an hour. Those are the same story, but just two different ways that myself, as the admissions counselor, is going to read it. And so be vulnerable, right? Be open. This is your chance to share who you are, but be real. Don't just tell a story that you think, oh, this is what the admissions counselors want to hear, or this is going to get me in, or this is what they want to hear, or this is what they're looking for. Tell the true story to you, because that's going to shine through. That's going to make the difference when it's a time when you really evolved as a person, when you grew, when you developed in some way. If it's real, that's going to shine through on the paper versus you just telling me something you think that I want to hear, kind of a thing. So be true to yourself when you're writing that essay.
All right, great question. So moving on to the day, the whole pandemic and COVID-19 stuff. How do you think this pandemic will affect future or upcoming college experiences?
Yeah, great question. We see that it already is, right? We can see that there are some effects currently happening. Some colleges are still unsure what they're doing in the fall. Some are moving to hybrid models. Kind of to go off of your question earlier, I've seen some universities who are actually telling their sophomore, juniors, and seniors that it's virtual for them and only bringing their freshmen to campus so that they could get that first year experience, so that there aren't as many students. They could spread students out a little bit more easily, but it's important to have their freshmen there on campus was one of the things that I saw some colleges and universities doing. Some things that they're doing this year. So usually that they call May 1st decision day. And so the reason that it's May 1st is that basically your universities have that pool of money that I was talking about. And on May 1st is usually that final day when you need to make that decision and tell a university, yes, I am coming to you, and telling your other universities, bless you, telling your other universities, no, not coming to you, because that's when they start to give away that money, right? So that May 1st is decision day. I say, okay, IU, I'm going to go to your school. Okay, cool. Now that you're coming to my school, we see that we have X amount of dollars in scholarships for you, X amount of dollars in loans for you. Here's your total award package. But if I wasn't going to go to IU, if I told, hey, IU, sorry, I'm not going to go to your school, I'm going to go somewhere else, that money that they had that they were going to give to me, they can now turn around and give it to somebody else, right? So that's a super important date to make sure that you're letting your universities know by that May 1st so that you could secure that scholarship money, so that you could secure those funds. If they don't hear from you, they might assume that you're going to go somewhere else, and they might start giving that money away. And so you really want to make sure that you're letting those universities know. The reason that I bring that up with COVID is because a lot of universities this year extended that deadline. They were saying, look, we know it's almost impossible for you to know what school you're going to go to when we don't even know what the fall is going to look like. We also know you're dealing with so many other things right now that probably deciding which school to go to is probably the bottom of your priority list, as all of these things are shifting, and there's people are worried about health and jobs, and now your school is online. And so a lot of universities this year changed that May 1st deadline to a June 1st deadline. There were some that even pushed it to a July 1st deadline. So that was one way that it changed this year. I've seen for future years, there are some universities who are discussing maybe making the SAT or the ACT optional. They know that a lot of juniors this year didn't have the chance to take that test in April or May or June or July, right? And so they know that this year, when you would normally be taking your SATs or your ACTs as juniors, those opportunities weren't available. And so for that class who's about to be seniors next year and applying to colleges, they might be a little bit more lenient. I've seen some colleges that are saying, we're not going to look at SAT or ACT scores as closely. Some have even gone so far to say we're not even, we're test optional. You don't even have to send us your scores. And so that's one way that they've been adapting as well. I think some of the things, if you're on campus, that might change, might be class sizes, right? You may not have any of those classes where you see in the movies where there's like 500 people in one classroom. I'm sure they're going to try to eliminate those as much as possible. And maybe it's got 500 seats in it, but there's only 100 students so that everybody could spread out and do every other seat or something like that. So that might be one way that it changes. I think it could be cool to be at one of those universities where it's only freshmen. College is this really unique time where it's like the only time in your life where you're going to be surrounded by only folks who are like 18 to 24, right? Like when you leave college and you go to Target or whatever, there could be somebody working there who's 16. There could be somebody working there who's 65. Chances are, if you go to the Targets that's by your college, the individuals working at that Target are also the college students, right? So it's this really cool time where you could be around a lot of other young people, a lot of other folks who are motivated and pushing themselves to develop and progress in their goals. And once you kind of leave that college, you don't find that anymore. My next door neighbor on one side of me has a family. My other next door neighbor is retired. But when I was in college, both my neighbors were also college students, right? And so it's this cool time to really meet other people that are your same age. And so I think in the time of COVID, it's about finding those opportunities to do those things virtually, right? It's easy when it happens organically because you're living in the dorm and there's everybody's living in the same dorm, right? But if colleges aren't open, there will be opportunities. Your universities they'll host get-togethers for freshmen. They'll host clubs for freshmen. So they'll make sure that you're still finding ways to make those connections and to engage with each other. But the big differences might be just what tests look like, what requirements look like. They might extend some deadlines. There's also money available. So the government sent money. It's called the CARES Act that they sent to all of these colleges and universities that the colleges and universities have to use on students. So they can't take money from this CARES Act and use it to buy a new football field. They have to take money from this CARES Act and give it back into the hands of students. And so that's one way they're trying to continue to support students now who may be experiencing some additional financial hardships due to COVID-19. You can go through the CARES Act and request more money. Another thing that I want to mention is that you can always ask for more money to your financial aid office. They might say, hey, here's your $10,000. and you could do an appeal and say, hey, this is why I think I need $20,000. And you could always ask for more. You're not always going to get it. The chances are you may not get it, but it's one of those things where it doesn't hurt to ask. And it's one of those things that if you're always in their face, if you're working in their office, if you're jumping in and saying hi every day, then they may be more inclined to assist you. And it comes back to the number of students who ended up going there, right? So if I think that I had $50,000 set aside in scholarships for these 10 students who I thought were going to come to my university, and all of a sudden only 5 of them are going to come, I now have this $5,000 extra in money. And Danny, if you come and say like, hey, do you have an extra $1,000 to help me out with books? All of a sudden I do, right? I never thought that I would, but now I do. And so always asking, is there anything more you could do? Is there any additional money? Is there any way that you could help out with this tuition? And not being afraid to ask those questions, I think is will help as well, specifically in the time of COVID too.
Great. So is there any more last minute advice that you would give to me or either like future students going to?
Yeah. Some last minute advice. I think my biggest piece of advice would be to trust your ability. You worked hard. You earned your spot in college. It wasn't given to you. It wasn't a handout. You worked hard to get there. And believe in that. Believe that you deserve. You're fine. Believe that you deserve to be there. I remember as a freshman, it's really easy to have that imposter syndrome. I remember sitting in one of my first classes, and the instructor said, "Okay, everybody, we're going to hand out the syllabus." And I'm sitting there like, syllabus? What is a syllabus? Like, I already don't know a word in the first sentence that was said in college, and I don't even know what you're talking about, right? So it's really easy to feel like maybe I can't do this. Maybe I don't belong. I don't know what a syllabus is. Everybody else seems to know what a syllabus is. I've never heard that word before. Don't allow that doubt to win. I promise you, everybody else in that room is also pretending that they know what a syllabus was, right? Nobody knew. It was the first time we were all hearing it. And so there's going to be words that you hear. College is its own unique culture and language, and you're going to hear words like syllabus, and it's really just like the list of assignments and when they're due and our classroom expectations, right? That's what a syllabus is. Why they don't just call it classroom expectations, I don't know. You're going to hear things like, I'll never forget someone being like, yeah, and then you could attend office hours for extra credit. And I was sitting there like, I have to go sit in your office for a whole hour? And like, no, right? It doesn't have to be a whole hour. It could be, you could pop in for 5 minutes just to say, hey. In fact, I would recommend doing that. Show your face in the office hours. Make sure that professor knows your name. Make sure you're popping in. You're going to hear about credit hours. This is a 1 credit hour class. This is a 3 credit hour class. And you're like, well, I don't even know what a credit hour is. Should I take 3? Should I take 1? Is there a difference? And credit hours are really just the amount of time they expect you to spend in that class, right? So I mentioned I took a racquetball class. That was 1 credit hour. I took my history class. That was 3 credit hours because it was more intensive than just playing racquetball for a grade. And so there's going to be terms that you hear that may sound new. That's okay. They're new to everybody. Trust your ability. Don't let that doubt win. Don't sit there thinking that everybody else is smarter or better. You worked hard. You deserve that spot at that university. It was not given to you. It was not a handout. You earned it. And you got there because you're smart enough, because you're capable. My biggest piece of advice is not to doubt that, not to lose sight that you have the ability to succeed in college, and not only succeed, but to thrive, to make it your own, and to push yourself, and to be a leader, and to push your friends forward. You have that in you, and so there are going to be those times when that doubt comes creeping in. I remember calling home and being so homesick, and like, Mom, I don't know if I should be here. I don't know if I could do this. And then I learned that like everybody was homesick, right? Like everybody misses their friends. They miss that familiarity. They miss that comfort. So you're not alone. Don't feel like if you start to have some of these emotions, if you start to feel that doubt, if you start to feel homesick, that is so normal. That is so natural. You are not alone in those feelings. Again, you worked hard. You earned your spot. You deserve to be at the university. Don't let that doubt win. You can do it.
All right. Thank you so much. This stuff was really helpful, things that you were saying. I hope it was very helpful to the viewers that came in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was some really good stuff. I just want to thank you for that.
Well, appreciate it. Thank you, too, Danny. Those were just awesome questions. It was an awesome conversation. Really appreciated you asking some of those hard questions, right? And really, I think it's important for individuals to share their experiences and lessons learned, even if they weren't necessarily the best lessons. And really, really happy to be a part of this. Like Danny mentioned, I do the post-secondary programming at After School Matters. So if anybody's interested in school year programs or anything like that, internships, we're going to launch the fall application is going to launch on August 10th. So my email address, I'm going to say it a couple of times. If anybody wants to write it down, feel free to shoot me an email. And we can talk about internships and things like that. My email address is Joseph, Joseph, period, Roth, R-O-T as in Tom, H. So Joseph.Roth at afterschoolmatters.org. So JOSEPH.ROTH at afterschoolmatters.org. Send me an email. We could talk about different programs, different ways to get involved at ASM. Hope to see all of you around in the fall. And it's been great chatting with you, Danny. Thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you so much. You have a good day.
You too. See you, everybody. Take care.